Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And on the program, it's another one of our things. It's another one of our All Things Canada edition, and I'm happy and so honored to welcome to the show Barbara Waldern. We're hoping that Jason Baines might come, but most likely there's a chance that's probably just going to be me and Barbara. But let me introduce her. She's a leftist activist. She's particularly involved in anti-imperialism and the peace movement, and a strong advocate against Western economic terrorism, sabotage, or sanctions, as they are called in popular political discourse and pro-imperialist Western chauvinist media. And we're here to discuss the end of the NDP leadership race and both the end of the Yves and Bianca leadership bid team, which they were both barred from running in the leadership race. But there are wonderful meetings which continue now, and those involved in leadership bids have transformed themselves into a left wing advocacy group called Capitalism Can't Be Fixed. Onward to a Socialist Future. That was the name of the manifesto. That 45 members of Yves' leadership team were involved in advocating socialist, eco-socialist policies, as well as radical anti-imperialism and Palestine justice. And yes, so this is sort of an autopsy episode, but also we're going to be reflecting on the victory of Avi Lewis. And where does the anti-imperialist left movement go from here? And let's begin. Oh, but before we do begin, just a reminder, of course, folks, to share widely One Plus One, share us across social media and email. It's our only way of overcoming the far-right algorithms and the monopoly Western corporate and state media have in the social media world, including to the leftist websites. So please share widely. Please donate if you can at our PayPal. And if folks prefer a different form of donation, get in touch at yurismatter at Gmail. And Facebook sometimes blocks my ability to share, so it's important that people share widely. And last but not least, please help my friend Chris Richards by becoming a Patreon to his outlets, The Eclectic Radical, whom I often collaborate with. It's money better spent. You can give up Spotify because YouTube has all the free music. So do help out Chris, who's facing unemployment. And now on to the topic at hand. So because Jason's not here, I think this might be a bit of a shorter episode, but this is all, which is fine. But well, first of all, Barbara, actually, tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit about your background before I get into my first question about Avi
Okay,
Lewis, the leadership, and the end of the leadership race and whatnot.
right. So I kind of, as a young woman, was instinctively anti-capitalism, and of course, learning about my own experience as a girl, as a worker, and knew that it was possible to change society. And I waited until after I got my first degree out of the way, and then tried to find various leftists. So I learned a lot, hung out with the Marxist-Leninists for a while and various, and studied and did activism. Was never a party member, but anyway, so I've been on the far left all along, and I started going to protests in the peace movement against the testing of the cruise missile, of the torpedoes in La Bay, which is off Vancouver Island near Vancouver,
Wow.
and the Cold Lake base and the testing there with the cruise missiles and against nuclear weapons. And at around that time in the 80s, there was a lot of racism rising because there had been a policy to bring in migrants from Asia for workers, to be workers.
Uh-huh.
And there was a rise in racism and some incidents happening there. And so I was in the anti-fascist movements at the time. So I've just continued where I can. I was in the anti-globalization movement that happened late 90s into the 2000s. I went to the battle in Seattle,
Wow.
and I was at the battle against APEC in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Fantastic.
and then I met some people in the Filipino community who were organizing for human rights in the Philippines. And I joined an organization there. I went on some trips and fact-finding missions and conferences and so on. And we would bring the information back to Canada and do a lot of media work and writing and meeting. And we worked with all kinds of people to revive the solidarity movement. There had been a big one against the first Marcos regime in the 80s, and Canada played a big role in that, as they have in Cuba solidarity and other international solidarity things like with Nicaragua. But anyway, so I did that for a few years, and then there's a change, and then I went back to university and got a degree in social science, and then it was hard to get work. I found myself to be a migrant worker working overseas in South Korea. They
Oh,
were
wow.
taking in a lot of um, English speakers, right, for their English language program, which is part of their whole economic development scheme. They wanted English teacher in every classroom, and there were these after-school programs. We were notorious for exploiting people, not knowing what they're doing. So had some interesting experiences there and started a teacher support group once I learned what was going on, and to share the information and help other struggling migrant teachers. And I became connected with the labor movement in South Korea and the peace movement. So I went to meeting. I've been in the streets of Seoul
Wow. And
protesting in
in
front of the
fact,
National Police, sitting
in
sitting
fact,
on the
Barbara,
pavement. Yeah, yeah. Came back in 2017 and was, the danger of war had really ballooned in the Korea Peninsula. So I was doing advocacy work for that. I wanted to do general work in the peace movement again. And so I started Just Peace Committee. I noticed that there weren't any significant public commemorations of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I had been on a tour in Japan while I was living on the other side of the ocean, and that was a commitment I made to some Japanese activists that I made friends with. So wanted to at least have something going on in the public sphere. And also the Stop War Coalition in Canada had just died. So that I worked with whoever I could to try to build that. And of course, the need today is huge. We're being attacked from all sides, and what's going on in West Asia, Ukraine, Latin America is appalling. And so it's good to see the rise in the movement. And more and more we can see that capitalism is running out of gas, literally and figuratively, and it's on the path of destruction and fascism. And more than ever, we need to be uniting and working toward a new type of society. So I was so happy when the chance to join this new socialist movement came up.
well, Barbara, I definitely have to beg you to come back soon because you talked about the Philippines and being involved in Filipino solidarity work and South Korea. I'm fascinated by the Philippines, and I would love to explore Canada's role in supporting Marcos and then co-opting the anti-Marcos. You
Yeah.
can call
Well,
the people.
recently there's a new visiting forces agreement. So now Canada is sending troops, actually. They didn't really support much. They gave aid, strings attached aid, but they weren't directly in support other than participating in the regional um, military exercises around the archipelago of the Philippines, the Balikatan exercises every year. But now they have this visiting forces thing, and the U.S. has expanded its presence and its bases on the Philippines, and so Canada is going to be operating with them.
Yeah, I would definitely love to have you back on to.
Well, I know people who are more informed doing more specific work on that. I don't do specific work on that anymore these days, but yeah, I can help find some good speakers for you.
Perfect. And you also mentioned South Korea. In fact, I've actually I have a playlist filled with a bunch of stuff on South Korea, North Korea, the Koreas, which I'm doing research on, and I'm going to try to do in the future a series of interviews on South Korea and North Korea. So would definitely love to have you come back on
Sure.
to discuss that. Uh, and anyways, it's a fascinating part of the world, and I would love to, yeah, would definitely love to have you to talk to you about that. So, and all right, let's so first question is this. So you were part of both Yves and Bianca's efforts to join the NDP leadership race formally. What do you fantastic, fantastic shirt. Gotta get me one of those.
It's a
Uh,
souvenir now.
yeah. So first question is, what do you think the efforts to join? What do you think the efforts to for even Bianca to join that leadership race has done in the name of the anti-imperialism, socialism, and Palestine justice, which really should be all in one, not separate or mutually exclusive or mutually exclusive. Very curious by your response. Yeah, I'm very curious your response to that one first.
Well, we accomplished a couple of goals of pushing forward the positions, anti-imperialist positions, socialism, and social justice positions, and uniting a lot of people. Because right away he got Yves when he put his name forward to work with the Socialist Caucus of the NDP,
Yeah,
who are outside the NDP. They're the Socialist Action Collective across the country. And when he, I've lost my train of thought. Sorry.
When
Your
he put
question was.
himself forward, when he put himself
Yeah,
forward.
yeah. We achieved our goals of uniting people. We had 15,000 people join up, and they're ready to give a lot of money because the NDP required a candidate to have at least $100,000 to put forward while through the nominations process. So we started campaigning early. They took the tactic of fundraising and advertising that he wanted to be nominated in in the party. We did that early, which is not normally done. Normally, you apply and say, "Can I please be a candidate?" But we knew there would be a stiff reaction to some hard left socialists wanting to run candidates in the party, and we were right because they never did accept him and never gave any proper reason, just smeared him. And so then, yes, we put forward Bianca by near the deadline of the nominations period, which was in January. We got pledges again. We had another $100,000, not given, but sitting, waiting, pledged. And Bianca applied, and they gave more ridiculous answers to her to reject her. But the main thing was saying that she was a proxy, which is kind of insulting to a woman, especially a Black woman. Like, you can't think for yourself, you don't have your own ideas or history. So I think there's resistance. There's some kind of appeal on that grounds to the NDP. I don't expect to get very far. So, but we pressed ahead with a protest campaign. Our campaign turned instead of to supporting candidates, we didn't have candidates by the end of January. So we were a protest campaign, and we worked towards getting delegates at the convention the end of March in Winnipeg. And we had faced resistance all the way through. So a number of people who wanted to be delegates never got their credentials.
Yep.
So we should have had between 15 and 20 people, but we had 12 delegates in the end. And they even locked out the chairperson of the Socialist Caucus in the NDP, Barry Weisletter, who
Yeah.
has been in the NDP for over 50 years. So just in the week in the days before the convention happened, he finally got a letter from Ms. Watson herself, the national director, who is the main person corresponding to candidates and the main giving the messages that you're rejected here and there, you're not getting credentials. So, and that was quite a nasty letter, and it referred to an incident at the last convention, like 3 or 4 years prior, where one woman at the convention launched into a protest, I guess, on the convention floor in the halls. A young Palestinian woman, and Barry and others joined in with him, and they were protesting with her. So he was called disruptive, harassing people because he shouted at this incident. Totally ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it just shows how, because the NDP was not taking any position, um, anti-war positions. They hadn't said anything against the military budget once Carney got into power, and the whole militarization scheme. They weren't saying anything in Iran, and they were finally they did come out saying, yes, we want a ceasefire. The NDP came out saying we wanted a ceasefire at some point, but they're kind of wishy-washy on the whole question, right? So there's a lot of resistance to taking these really decent pro-life decisions, or positions where you basically want to save children from being murdered and save hospitals from being destroyed, and you know um, so it's on that level. So that's what we're up against, and that's just shows you why we needed to be there, why we had to have very strong voice for progressive positions, especially the anti-war positions. And so we got some delegates there. We did get out onto the floor. We did critique some of the resolutions. There's this whole resolution process where every electoral district that has an association of the NDP meets some months before the convention, and people argue over resolutions. You don't get much time to do it, and there's always too many resolutions. But even out of that, there was something like 1,600 resolutions. And then there's a process of prioritizing them. So there's online meeting of all the people who have been accepted by delegates. Go online over 3 days or 2.5 days on one weekend. It was March weekend before the convention, where we had to slice and dice. And but there were a lot of resolutions on Palestine, a lot on housing, poverty, economic reform, human rights, women's rights, indigenous rights, LGBTQ, etc. And so a lot of really good things, but somehow or other, it was the most diluted or weakest resolutions
Wow.
floated to the top. So there wasn't much we could say about them. They're generally okay, like underlining feminist principles and wanting a national housing program, and um, um, uh, there weren't any foreign policy, or hardly any foreign policy ones. There was this one weird one that came out of the unions about aligning NDP and the unions with the European Union.
Yes.
So you know about the European Union. Would you say it's supportive of workers? No, they're
No.
they're getting the countries into debt, right? They're into austerity programs, into militarization. They're destroying industries and the lives of working people. So I went up to the microphone and opposed that one, and it did get rejected, which is really interesting because after going through all that process, it was prioritized as number 3 in the category of stuff overseas. And so it had a lot of support. But the vote on the floor was like 60 to 40%, 60%, 40%, and it got rejected. So I'm proud of that. That's the kind of thing we're dealing with. And so there are a lot of fine-tuning the NDP policies according to their policy book, which are not, mostly they're positive. And there was the one resolution against the arms trade loophole, and Jenny Kwan was there, of course, and people supported that. But we said, well, let's just say outright what this loophole is about. So I also spoke on that one, and I said, well, we're raising it because of the genocide in Gaza. That's and other horrors that are going on because of the shipment of weapons through the US and Canada's weapons industry supplying it. And and so, just listed what our policy says. There are a few steps to other things you could do to oppose the agenda and stop the arms trade, stop Canada's involvement. So that's the way we dealt with. We were at the con mic and we would critique a lot of these resolutions where we could. There was one where Rob Ashton, who was the Labor candidate in the leadership race, he's from here, Longshoreman Union president, based outside Vancouver here. And he introduced the resolution to reduce the salary of CEOs. Well, of course, we want to, they're getting paid too much. But his argument, the resolution stated, and he argued that, well, the workers are doing everything, they're not doing anything, so we should cut down the salary. So we have one of our members, Stephen Crozier, also from this area, got up and said, wait a minute, if he's doing nothing, what are we paying them for? A fair wage for a CEO would be zero. So that's the kind of thing. But then we ended up voting mostly.
But also, I know in the manifesto, capitalism can't be fixed. Y'all actually advocate abolishing millionaires, correct?
Well, yeah. So Stephen got up, he gave that position, and he said on the question of CEOs, they're profiting from the back, they're exploiting workers and doing nothing except monitoring them. Yeah, but Rob Ashton had said, well, the workers do everything, they do nothing. So what are we paying them for at all?
Well, hold that thought for a bit. We'll talk more about the convention a bit because that was actually one of my questions. But before we talk a bit more about the convention, I wanted to ask you this, which going back to the hostility that she mentioned and the marginalization that both Yves and Bianca faced. Are you what's your overall assessment of the Avi Lewis campaign? And are you surprised that a man who, I don't know if he marketed himself as this, but his many supporters who are pro NDP, critical of the NDP, and exist in the indie nonprofit left or left-leaning media, certainly positioned Avi as the real left, the most left insurgent candidate since Tommy Douglas or Jack Layton, the latter who I don't think deserves that title. But of course, Avi won, and he was supported by. And I think I guess you could argue that Avi was certainly has been the most left that the NDP has the most left insurgent candidate the NDP has had since, I guess, a Sven Robinson or a Nikki Ashton, who was quite the flaming leftist in both of her attempts to run. Are you surprised that Avi has won? And if you're not surprised, do explain.
Yeah, no, not surprised.
Okay.
Because our experience of the capitalism can't be fixed, what began as the Yves Engler for NDP campaign, our experience is there's an appetite for socialism. There are a lot of people want it. They want to talk about it. They want to do things. They want to join with other socialists. So that's a response of the workers and the oppressed people to their experience in the economy and their observation of war and the realization that Canada is contributing more and more to human rights abuses and war abroad. So you have to put it in the big picture. Um, Social democracy was kind of justified by welfare capitalism, where you could regulate capitalism, you could create supports for workers to live a half decent life, or a certain, some strata of them anyway,
Yeah,
could live a half decent life and have community services, public services, education, healthcare, and so on to maintain themselves and keep a robust working class going, who would have take the wages that capitalists were kind enough to give them and put it back into circulation by buying products, right? But that's industrial capitalism. But that's over. Financialization has taken over. So for some years, and it has been able to sustain the limping capitalism for a while. But what's happening? Financiers take over, um, take over government, dominate the economy, and they want so-called passive income. They're not interested in producing anything. It's too much trouble, too much time, too much waste of the profits that they might be able to rake in. And so our economy is largely non-productive, right? Like manufacturing is very small. I mean, we're a resource country, mainly a resource export country, and that's what US domination turned us into. That's still a source of wealth and power for Canada.
yeah.
But yeah, because we have all that natural wealth, and but but the economy is run mostly by finance capital and all these service industries and technology, which is meant to do away more and more with workers and have an automated society, or computerized, digitalized society running things, and all set and programmed the way that the billionaire class, capitalist class, wants it. So, of course, that makes our lives more and more terrible. It makes our lives more expensive. It's harder and harder to find work, and harder to see what future can come out of it. And, to build a career, to build our lives into anything, try to be productive people is harder. And then it's much more brutal. Police activity, the military activity is more and more brutal. So people, of course, are responding to that reality. And so if you put that in the context, then um, um, somewhat Avi Lewis comes up, tests the water at the beginning of his campaign. He was much more cautious in what he was saying about West Asia, Palestine. He wouldn't even name the places, wouldn't name the governments. He would talk about that terrible situation over there, the death and destruction, but he wasn't really naming what was going on, because I
Uh-huh.
heard his launch speech and his winter solstice party speech. We were there. We talked to him in Vancouver. I think it was December 22nd. So he was still, very soft, a lot softer in that way. And he did talk about a public grocery chain thing, but he wasn't saying much about nationalizing industries. And then a few months later, into 2026, obviously he found it was safe, or there were both, it was safer to say that, and we were helping to make it safer. I think we had a big influence on pushing that direction. But also, it's the people want real solutions. So that combination of things going on um, made him more popular. It made him more popular when he would speak more forthrightly, identify as a socialist, and talk about more serious socialist reforms. they're but still it's reformist, right? We say capitalism cannot be fixed, especially at this point. It's a dying corpse. Well, it's almost a corpse, right? It's
Yeah.
turning into a corpse. But we want to deter chaos, fascism, war. And so that message was also through what he was saying. And so he came out much more strongly about Palestine. And he and all the leading candidates supported an emergency resolution on Iran and another one against the total blockade on Cuba. So those, of course, were very important. But I think it's the real movement of the people and this active alliance across the country, feeding the NDP with these messages. We have, as you said, our whole program, our platform, a 40-page platform of policies that are very realizable, very doable.
Yeah.
And so we influenced it, but we are also tuning into something happening in the political movement in the country. So Avi was able to do that, and it's a positive thing because we all together beat the far right that has had control of the NDP, and that contributes to pushing back the far right in the country. And it contributes to putting forward more progressive positions on a lot of issues across the country. So yeah.
No,
So
completely
it's a
agree.
good thing
Yeah.
that he was there at that time and was so equipped as he is to take on that position. It's a very positive thing. But right away, National Post and others trying to beat him up right away, even as his father has passed away and so on. So it's a very hard thing to do, and the right wing, the powers that be, are, as you know, much more brutal, much fiercer in attacking the people, and they have very sophisticated ways of using media and technology to do that. So this is what we're up to get. So we want to work with him in his campaign, and those of us who got our membership. Like I never been a serious member of the NDP before. I did a little bit to support Sven Robinson, who was known as an anti-imperialist before, but
Yeah.
and there are a lot of us who had never joined the NDP before. And Avi Lewis got a lot of younger people and others who hadn't been part of the NDP. So we want to work with them inside the party and outside the party.
That
And another thing that happened inside the party was this whole renewal movement, which I guess has been there for a long time, but they were really pushing democratization of the party, which is a way to empower the base and give the working people on different sectors more say and more room to maneuver and talk to each other, and more opportunity to actually push through um, meaningful policies, and organize in their areas. But they were really beaten back. Only one of their 26 resolutions got through. And I think they came across as being very bureaucratic because they didn't present their whole political framework when they talked. If they did that, then people would see the meaning in what they're doing, and I think they would feel more drawn in, and see the importance of it, because it just sounded, oh, they want to all these more, they want more hierarchy and more procedures. But I think it's worthwhile to work with them if they do couch their work in a political context, and if they cut down a lot of what they're doing. They're too much, like 26 resolutions just from them is too much. If
interesting.
they streamline what they're doing. So we also want to work with them. And but we are pushing forward to have a conference in May to keep attracting newcomers and reaching out to the left. This is more of a working meeting where we're preparing to launch a campaign. It may be renamed. And we're creating all our new structure for that, new Facebook page and website and bank account and email contacts and all that for that. And so we're going to keep going on, and maybe we'll be in a position by the next federal election to be able to have a slate of candidates who want somehow to cooperate, work together. I don't, as obviously they have to be a political party, or it could be a cooperation among leftists where you just cooperate. Okay, we'll all adopt some of these positions and we'll fill this writing and that writing. It could work out like that. But in the meantime, we'll keep building, and maybe we'll be able to have people get attention at the municipal level.
Well,
Work
let
at
me
the
ask.
municipal.
Let me ask this question. So you've already talked about your time at the NDP convention. If you want to talk a little bit more about it, the good, the bad, and the fugly, please do. But I have to ask this question, which is now, despite our beloved and my new favorite person, Jasmine Pearson, who's been on the show 3 times now, despite her not winning the NDP presidency. Are you a little hopeful with Avi, despite what went down during the leadership race, that there will be more room for the radical left to flourish under Avi Lewis, given his background with the Leap, him being a proxy for his wife, Naomi Klein, and the hostility that he's already received from the right-wing NDP, largely in Alberta and Saskatchewan? Thomas Mulcair, who is a Canadian corporate media and CBC darling, has expressed he's not enthusiastic at all about Avi's victory. And the institutions I just mentioned, and also the rabid Zionist groups that you mentioned, and if the answer is no, then how come? So.
Well, he's going to be preoccupied with surviving in the NDP and with eventually getting a seat in Parliament, and dealing with as such a small faction within the House of Commons. So that's the main situation for him to deal with. And he's going to get different arguments as to whether he should be associating more closely with the far left or not, right? And adopting certain positions. So it would be predictable that a lot of what he was saying, as has happened historically with most leadership candidates, all their ideas just stays talk, in the sphere of conversation, and it doesn't really, nothing really materializes. So a lot of what he's saying could get diluted, but they're quite a ways away from being able to implement anything in the House of Commons and to put any new legislation through. So the first thing for them is to build the party and to work towards getting more seats in the House in the next federal election. And we'll have to see what happens then and who are put forward as candidates. We'll probably want to work with them, trying to influence different candidates and get them to say kinds of things we're saying, and then in exchange for supporting them, right? So yeah, so at the ground level, because a lot of us are members of the NDP and we're in the we're attached to local associations of the NDP, and maybe active in the regional parties. We'll just keep trying to influence them the way we have. We'll just keep putting forward our policies, but our focus will be building the broader movement. And we think it can become more and more influential. It too will get more act, right? Become more dangerous for the bourgeoisie. And but we think what other direction is there? What options are there for the people? So I think they have to go this way, and more of them will start engaging And I think younger people are not afraid of socialism and imperialism, at least a lot of them. That those are very positive words, and they're talking about these things. They have a different way of coming at it, and we have to give them a lot of space and make it inviting for them and allow them to participate and bring in, more of their own sector into it. Um, we're kind of mixed. We have some young people, a lot of middle-aged people, a lot of the elders who have been in the radical movements for ages, like me. Um, but
but
well,
that's great,
does
and
that answer your question?
yes, no, but that's also great, and in fact, I think I believe I don't know if Jasmine said this on the air or off the air, but I believe when I was talking to her, she said that what was great about working with Yves' campaign was that you had all of these different age groups, and everybody was quite respectful for the younger generation and their radicalism, and vice versa, and so forth. So no ageism,
Mhm.
and that's great, and we need that because one thing I know I can't stand is efforts by the media and even different the left has a rich history of always falling into sectarianism, where you have where you have people who think that the only way that the younger generation can enjoy the fruits of their labor and so forth is if you cut Social Security, which I'm against because come on, these are people who have worked their entire lives. We should be taking care of them, and there always seems to be an effort to pit one age group and one demographic against the other. But now, of course,
Well,
but that was not the case.
that's the way
Yeah,
that's the way the colonial powers and the upper classes have always worked, right? They try to divide and rule. So they find any way they can, and they do that. Um, but yeah, Jasmine has, we learn from her and her age group, and they learn a lot from us because, if you talk to more of us, these are, we older ones are battle weary, very experienced, as I said myself, being on the streets, that we can tell a lot of stories, and there are loads and loads of them. And but that helps inform the movement. I work with a lot of young people associated with the ILPS, International League of People Struggling organizations. Here I hang back some of the time because you know it is a different kind of culture, and they have their own thing and social life and so on, and it's not what it was for me when I was young. But they welcome me there and my experience and my insight. They always want me to comment on things and take part in the organizing. So I'm frequently the only elder among all these 20-year-olds to early 30s. Um, but it's fine. You figure out how to go, and yeah. So um and it's amazing because they also have their own stories and their own the things come up in a surprising way, like the skills that surface, the strengths that they have, and their comments, and they are like these particular types of youth inform themselves by looking at revolutionary experiences in the Philippines and other countries. Like they learn a lot from Fanon and the Haiti struggle, and
yeah,
French Revolution, and Latin American struggles, and um, they're very supportive of Venezuela, Cuba, um, and North Korea as well, actually. So it's an exchange. Why not? You have to keep fighting against this effort to divide and rule. And I'm not saying
exactly.
ageism hasn't come up; it certainly has.
Oh yes, both. I mean, both institutional and reverse ageism, and we do have to fight against that. But that's great that that your experience and with the Eve Angler experience, there wasn't any of that. So that's great.
No, there's a very good atmosphere. Mostly, there, of course, There are differences, and there have been a few people walk out, but there have been more people come in the door, and it's generally a very good atmosphere, welcoming, where very, very democratic.
Fantastic. Then I have to ask this question. Then I have to ask this question. Now, I know I myself have been deeply disturbed, deeply disgusted, traumatized, even, and depressed by the behavior of a lot of Avi Lewis's campaign people. His, a lot of his, fangirls, fanboys, or persons, and to a degree himself, because now he did, to his credit, denounce Yves being blocked from entering the race. He didn't. I don't believe he said a statement about Bianca, and I really wish he would have. I really wish he would have reprimanded a lot of the disgusting, slanderous allegations that Yves was a grifter, an anti-Semite, Putin's puppet, Rwanda's genocide denier. That some of his campaign and some of his friends in the pro-Avi media sphere were doing, and the attack, and also the a lot of the intense attacks that came for Bianca too. And now that Yves would face hostility or total ignoring from the corporate media and the state media, that I'm not surprised. But again, I was actually very disturbed and shocked by how hostile and marginalized he faced in the left, the indie left media, the pro NDP media, that often criticizes the NDP for not being more left, not being more democratic. And yet, for Yves, they all seem to turn into control opposition and kneecapped a faction of the left, which, if you're an eco socialist, you know, uh, who understands, and to quote Abby Martin, that militarism is Earth's greatest enemy. And if you're an anti imperialist, and that includes Palestine, it just seems as if a lot of us are politically homeless in the NDP. So, what does that honorable people power movement do? Do we continue to advocate and try to influence the NDP, vote for the NDP as a constructive protest vote, or should we just only be supporting existing alternative left parties and dump the NDP once and for all? Very curious your response on
Okay, lots of things in that. First, I'll say that
Apologies for that. I
Avi
tend to be
Lewis
an
was,
avalanche when I ask questions.
well, as I said, we did have an opportunity to talk to Avi Lewis once last December in person, and he all along has wanted to revamp the federal council, and didn't like the mysterious way that nominations were handled. And he and a lot of his supporters, and I know some of them here in my own riding, they're in my riding association. They really very concerned about the level of bureaucracy and the way that a lot of progressive ideas and people get blocked. So in general, but no, not much very specific support for Eve Engler in the circumstances. So I think in my experience, and from Marxist-Leninist point of view, uh, social democracy has its role. Um,
Yeah.
there's it's understood by a lot of revolutionary inclined people that it is there as to put a false third path on the road, and that it wants to divert the revolutionary path, and it gives people hope in reforming capitalism, just having some nice people in capitalism and controlling the corporations and the military and having more control over the budget. Um, so, um, we say capitalism can't be fixed. So we're not for, we don't stand for social democracy. And after Yves' candidacy was rejected, he went on a tour and has been campaigning about the failure of social democracy.
Mm-hmm.
So at the same time, our campaigns operating within the NDP, because we know there are a lot of good-hearted people concerned about the situation in the world, who they themselves do a lot of work for social causes, for social justice. They work in a lot of professions like housing, medical professions, community programs, and so on. And they want the best, or not only for themselves, but for other people. So most of the rank and file are like that. How do they regard socialism? I think there's a lot of confusion about that, and there are different types of socialism, right?
Yeah.
We we are a red socialists who want to transform society. We know we can't do it all at once. It's a process. We prefer to do it through elections and peacefully, right? So, but there's a lot of fear, and within the NDP, there's a lot of those on the right in the leadership, and maybe sincerely, some people sincerely are afraid of red socialists. They think we want to bring the guns out and the pitchforks, and that we're violent.
Yeah.
So that's a characterization of Yves, a characterization of Barry Weisletter, as you're disrupting, you're dangerous to people, you're making people uncomfortable and scared, and so on. But where does that line come from? This is what the ruling classes say about any dissident, right? You're potentially a terrorist. And there is a lot of fear mongering and about people who they live a middle class life, or think that they live a middle class life, and they want a certain order in society, and they want to do good things, but they're afraid of big changes. They're afraid of mass movements.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people in the NDP who wouldn't even show up for protests, and they have to be really friendly protests with puppets and fluffy things and sunshine, and you know um and this is the thing with the labor movement. We should talk about the labor movement because it still has a lot of control over the NDP, and what's happened to the leadership. It is so conservative, where they are not opposing war making because they want to get jobs from militarization. I mean, this is disgusting, a disgusting outlook.
Yeah.
They should be fighting. Like Rob Ashton, the first thing I said about him was, well, I didn't see the longshoremen out there blocking the docks from the shipments of whatever, and the Israeli cargo ships and the shipments of things going to war that pass through this huge port of Vancouver. It was people like me out there and other more vigorous supporters who blocked the docks. It wasn't them. And in all the Palestine demonstrations and so on, do you see a union flag? You don't never see the NDP formally there. We know there are people who are members of unions and members of the NDP there. You never see them there represented formally as an organization. Never.
Yeah.
And that's pretty bad.
In fact,
So, but that's not the rank and file, that's the leadership. And because the unions have become these corporate entities where they enjoy big salaries, a comfortable life, all these protections. They stay in their nice offices, and they have to endure meetings, but they're not really supporting workers outside the contract. They only focus on the economic struggle of their individual contracts.
yes, exactly.
Now and then they'll come out and they'll support another union, like some of them here will support the hotel workers who have been striking on and off, for example. You know, so and they don't do political education.
Yes. Yeah.
Some of the lower in the locals try to do that, and they run into trouble when they try to do that. But, otherwise you would be talking about the capitalists and the workers and working class struggle and the history of working class struggle, and participation of the labor movement in there as part of the vanguard
But
of the
then,
people's struggle.
but then, Barbara, I have, I'm so glad you brought up the issue of the unions. I'm really glad you brought that up. It's a topic which often gets criminally overlooked, and we actually should be talking more about it. When I first interviewed Barry Weisleder of the NDP Socialist Caucus and Socialist Action Canada, I think I remember when we finally got to, the part of the interview where I asked the big question, why spend all this time, trying to reform the NDP and so forth. He countered that question with mine, by saying, "Look, the NDP has its problems, and I do understand people's criticisms about the NDP. But the same people who are complaining nonstop about the NDP and about the NDP being unreformable, they don't say that about the many unions that support the NDP, some who even support liberal parties. And nowadays, you have this crazy thing where you have even some unions, not police unions, but some unions supporting a Doug Ford over here or a Pierre Poilievre over there. And oftentimes, when I do get into arguments with people, I would even say arguments, discussions with people, my far left comrades, who say that there's no point in reforming the NDP, oftentimes, I do ask them, well, what about all of the unions, and people in union leadership? It's not just the NDP that has a democratic deficit; it's all of these unions. And then the responses I get, yeah, I've not really been too impressed with the responses. A lot of the times, the people just completely ignore that. So I'm very, very glad that you brought that this up because uh, yeah, and with that being said, did a lot of unions even come out in support of Avi over Yves, or some members wanted to support?
I fear not. Yeah, I think not. In fact, one of the things coming through the media was that he's not a labor guy. So there could
Oh
be
wow, they're
well,
trying
and
to
that was
attack him
part
like
of
that.
the struggle at the top, I think. But when I think we got the numbers about how many labor representatives were among the delegates, they are outnumbered. But there's quite a power struggle at the top. And one of the things they're saying, he's not. He's been a professor and a TV show host and whatnot. Not It's not a labor organizer. It doesn't have that history. So
Oh wow,
yeah, like I say, he's got battles ahead of him. Um, but Well, yeah, the Socialist Caucus, I understand, got underway about 30 years ago as a faction within the NDP, and they stuck with the NDP because they see it as a labor party. It's where organized labor can come together, and a lot of issues of the working class can be discussed, but they are less and less so, and the unions are, well, I haven't looked at the numbers for the number of organized labor, but I know there's a downward pressure, right? There's some fight back. There's a lot of more union activity these days in fighting to build new locals and new unions and so on.
wow,
But
unbelievable.
um,
But that's
I think I don't think the NDP is the way. And in fact, these Socialist Caucus members that I've been getting acquainted with within our movement are, they're keen on creating a new party. And
interesting.
even I don't know if I should say publicly. I'm just going to say
Yes,
that's
yeah,
all.
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
want to mention
Exactly,
names,
exactly.
but tried for a long time and but in the past, some of them would get elected, some of the Socialist Caucus candidates would get elected into council positions, executive positions. And they would normally, they said, get 20 to 30% of the vote. But this time it was way lower, even though our presence was way bigger.
But that's where the whole but of course that's where the whole dilemma comes in, because Avi Lewis, this is something that continues to really frustrate me about Avi Lewis and the folks that supported him, is that Avi Lewis himself, kind of has eco-socialist cred because he was part of the Leap, which we have to mention. Bianca was also part of the Leap, and she gets criminally overlooked her role being part of that. And yes, and he has this street cred of being this sort of token NDP supporting lefty of the CBC, who later does work with Al Jazeera and a more independent media. Naomi Klein, of course, we all know her with her extraordinary work with the shock doctrine, which gave us a blue which went to the history of what we now call austerity, but the economic shock therapy and the radical market fundamentalism of Mills and Friedman and so forth like that, and how it was
On their
used.
documentary, they did some good documentary films.
Exactly, including one on Argentina. And,
The
Avi,
co-ops, yeah.
exactly. And with Avi Lewis, when the Leap was trying to advance itself and really trying to influence the NDP, Thomas Mulcair was very hostile towards it. Rachel Notley of the Alberta NDP, who only served for one term, was very hostile to it. So you would have, and of course, and then of course there's the and of course there's also the story that Avi, his father Stephen Lewis, grandfather David Lewis, Stephen Lewis, leader of the Ontario NDP, David Lewis of the federal NDP, both kicked out, both kicked out the waffle, both very pro imperialism and so forth, and pro Zionism. So you would have thought somebody like Avi Lewis, who really just tried to, market himself as being, a great friend of the left and the radical leftists, that, that that there wouldn't have been this controlled opposition sort of thing, which happened with a lot of the people who were pro Avi, a lot of the people in the media like the Breach who were part of his campaign. That's just something which really gets under my skin, because now that he is leader by, and I still find that a bit of a miracle. You wonder how he's going to be able to advance eco-socialism and so forth when he now has to butt heads with the very people who are going to start within the NDP themselves, within the establishment, are also going to be punching left and saying that no, we have to be. I mean, they won't say this out loud, but they'll basically say, but paraphrase what that we have to be a diet liberal party.
Mm.
So
Well,
yeah, I'm
my
curious your response.
impression is that he's a good person, and he wants the best. He wants socialism, I believe.
Okay.
Okay, but he's got a job. He's got a job in a failing organization that's what, $13 million in debt. And what would you do? You want to try to keep your job. So what do we do when we try to keep our job? We often make compromises, right? So that's what's going to happen. But hopefully enough people get behind him and enough people are cool-headed enough and avoid the personality fixations and
Yeah.
just say, what's a good policy? What's a good project? What's a good campaign? And support the most positive projects, campaigns, policies, you know, um, and that's how I view it. And here's how I view these kinds of choices in the movement. You have, first of all, you have to look at what's going on in the world. You have to follow your conscience. If you have empathy, you've got to take the positions that support humanity and support being kind and having what's necessary to keep people alive, but more than that, thriving. right? We want society, we want people to be able to enjoy life and to thrive and not have to work too hard, and but still produce something in society that's worthwhile, and what there's differences in what people think are worthwhile, right? You can't be chasing the dollar all the time and live in a peaceful way, and live in a moral way. Um,
The whole ignorance is
so
bliss. Yeah.
there's that level. And so then uh, try to associate with other people who are acting out of conscience. So they may belong to different groups and different parties, but what are they saying? What are they doing? What are they doing? Do they go to a protest? Do they organize anything? What kinds of positions do they support? What kind of activities do they organize? Okay, and then you have to be out there and generate more responses. Keep agitating to get people thinking, questioning, and activate them, get them into the movement, and be there for the young people to help answer their questions and give somewhere for them to go, and tell them there is some hope, there is something they can do, change is possible. So that's how I view it as a wise old woman. But it's has how I viewed it for a long time.
Yeah.
So I make friends with all sorts of people and try to have cooperation on different kinds of things. I mean, there are very positive cultural events that people who are not particularly political minded, but in spite of that, they're doing something that's very socially positive in their cultural work. You should support that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, uh, that's I well, you know, final question. Actually, my second to last question I wanted to ask you. Changing subject for a bit. Uh, we see, of course, with the pivot to Asia. There's lots of talks of being anti-NATO, which is very good, and I'm very supportive of that. But what's being very overlooked is what's called the pivot to Asia, the sort of new Cold War on China and the efforts to contain China, which is a whole other topic for another day. But I did want to ask you this question, regarding China, which is, can you explain to people, misguided people, well-intentioned people, as we've talked about, who think that it's a good idea to be to try to contain China and build up militarism around China and the Korean Peninsula. And can you explain to people that when you do support a reactionary policy like that, you're supporting the most reactionary far right movements in South Korea, which almost a far right coup was almost going to happen. In Japan right now, the LDP, which, oh my gosh, it's like a dictatorship. That party is still there, supported by U.S. and Canadian influences and big business, and the global right, and that's a very, very, very far right regime. What the Japanese working class have to go through, and when we support the pivot to Asia, what we really are doing is supporting more militarism in South Korea, in which the deep state there is very, very undemocratic and kneecaps the working class movement there. With Japan, the militarism on Okinawa, that is not a good thing for the environment and so forth. And and again, whatever criticism one wants to make of North Korea, uh, you know, supporting militarism there means that North Korea feels threatened and feels that they have to continue to militarize themselves. So, can you talk about how supporting the pivot to Asia again supports the most reactionary movement in that part of the world?
Yeah, well, it puts everybody in more danger. It can give rise to more open war, and which ruins people's lives, ruins society. So, no, you don't want to support it. So, capitalism can't be fixed. The whole anti-imperialist movement, International League of People's Struggle, and the Canada-wide Peace and Justice Network, which I'm involved into, we all call for closing the bases, reducing military spending, militarization, getting the foreign forces out of these areas, stop the military exercises and patrols of, then on the practical level, people are pointing out that the US is running out of resources. It can't produce its own weaponry, and it's running out of allies and proxies. And it's had to pull away some forces like aircraft carriers out of the Asia Pacific into the Gulf and thereabouts. So can they do all these things and wage war in Latin America and so on? Not really, no. And I think in the world there's probably less and less appetite for it. It's the failure of capitalism itself is putting the brakes on it. But you can't underestimate the fascist mind, which is
Exactly.
out in the open these days. And they do still have a lot of weaponry, and they have hold no bounds, right? They do anything. Um, and so we have to continue putting pressure on the Canadian government to get out of it and put its mind to actually helping its own people. And yeah, we need defense. These countries need defense. To be fair to China, they need a military defense in the circumstances. But I think there are some new developments. I was just reading something about a historic visit to Taiwan. Chinese leaders are going to visit on an official visit the first time in 10 years, and they may be able to cut off this effort to try to stir up divisions in Taiwan and cause more of a conflict with China. But I know people in Taiwan, and I think that the people don't want a war with China.
Yeah.
The government will say, and certain people associated with corporations that benefit will say they do, but they're a minority, right? And the Korean people, they don't want war, they want peace in the Korean Peninsula. They're kind of resigned to just letting North Korea be what it wants, and North Korea is no longer trying to work towards an integrated society anymore. So the bases should be shut down in Japan, Korea, and Philippines. They should get out of there. But I'm thinking because this is a year for the Rim of the Pacific exercises, one of the, if not the biggest, ocean military exercises led by the US. It's been going on since 1971, and Canada has been very enthusiastic about being part of it since then. It happens every 2 years. And I was part of a mobilization in San Diego 2 years ago against the Rim of the Pacific exercises, RIMPAC, as it's called for short. But I'm wondering how much they can participate and how much even the Canadian forces can participate. The US, I think it really ballooned the last time. They had more countries involved, more aircraft and ocean vessels than ever 2 years ago. But this time, I don't think they can do it. I think they'll still hold something. And, it's projecting power. It's a show of force. A lot of this is a show. And they can't do much more than put on a show. But even the Canadian forces, because Carney's talking about building this all up, but in having more personnel in the army and reserves and
I mean, well, yeah. I mean, spending
more
5%. I mean,
new vessels,
spending
submarines,
five
and all
percent
that.
GDP.
But
Yeah.
they don't have that. And they're trying to make more deals with customers such as South Korea. They're signing these memorandums and all that to try to stir that up. But I as I said, in general, it's all running out of gas, literally and figuratively. So that doesn't mean we should stop demonstrating. On the contrary, it's the moment to increase our opposition because imperialism is weakening, and we can make more gains in pressing against these weak spots.
Fantastic. Now, before we go, it is time for the questionnaire that was done by Marcel Proust, later perfected by the late popular French broadcaster Bernard Pivot, and my hero, the late James Lipton of Inside the Actors Studio. Barbara, because it's your first time on the show, it's your turn to do this, starting with the following. What is your favorite word?
Word?
Yeah, favorite word.
I guess I have to say justice, don't I?
Okay, what is your least favorite word?
Oh, uh, foul words, especially against women.
Okay, fantastic. What sound or noise do you love, followed by what sound or noise do you dislike?
Well, I like birds.
Birds, okay.
Dislike heavy machinery, grinding machinery noises.
Yeah, the sound of capitalism and industrialization.
Yeah, that's right.
What is your what's your favorite curse word? I'm curious.
Well, I found myself saying JC again yesterday, and I thought, where did that come from? Do I have to say that? But I have my views on all that. I don't think he minds really.
The
He's as part of the universal power center, you know,
okay,
of love and goodness. I don't think he minds.
okay, so oh, so if I understood correctly, is your favorite curse word or the curse word you use is like Jesus Christ, like in a bad tone,
Well,
or
I just mentioned that it surfaced yesterday, and I think it surfaces sometimes. Yeah, so that's what I thought of.
okay, okay, interesting. All right, not using the
But
Lord's
I don't
name.
think, yeah,
Okay,
I don't want to get into my whole philosophy about that. I'm not religious. I'm not a member of church. But, if this is a good spirit trying to spread love in the universe, do I really want to use his name badly? Not
okay,
really.
all right, interesting. Then, what turns you on? What inspires you emotionally, spiritually, or psychologically?
Well, being in the struggle is always a source of that. And otherwise, good, wholesome exercise, music. I sing. I've been learning ukulele. I'm in a ukulele group. We play for people in a medical center.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, then what turns you off then?
What turns me off
Yeah.
is people who just are not considerate of others.
Okay. And then what profession, if you weren't doing the fantastic work you do, what profession would you love to do?
Yeah, I've thought about that. I like kind of organizing and talking about important things, but I don't know where I would be placed. But also, I like singing. I thought, well, it would be nice to be a professional singer.
So professional singer, and then well, I invite you on 1+1 if you ever you want to educate our audience about anything and everything, because yes, he would be a great teacher.
Well, that seems to be my place in the universe. Speaking of the universe, is I can't help it. I'm an educator.
All right, then what profession would you absolutely not want to do under any circumstances?
Oh, well, um, I wouldn't want to be the leader of a country.
Okay, and all right, wouldn't want to be a leader of a country. Okay, and then the final one, very curious, your answer to this one. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say as you arrive at the pearly gates, or whatever is your vision of the afterlife? And even if you're an atheist, please do answer
Okay.
the question.
What would I like it or her or him to say?
Or yeah, or they.
But, you made a good contribution with your life. Welcome.
If they exist, they would definitely be saying that, Barbara. Well, we were joined on this edition of One Plus One, our All Things Canada edition, with Barbara Waldern, who's as everybody should know by now, a veteran peace activist, anti-imperialist, and wonderful leftist. Barbara, thank you so much for coming on. I hope that this will be the first of many conversations we have both on and off the air. And I also just want to say this. It's a pity Jason's not here, but I am going to say this to you because I wanted because I prepared these remarks. I also want to thank you very much for fighting Yves and Bianca's corner during those very grueling 6 month or however long
Yeah.
it was. I know for a fact I would not have been able to have gone through what they went through, but I know with a very good group of like-minded comrades who were fighting their corner and reassuring them, I know for a fact that that is what would have kept me going. So I want to thank you and the others, that entire team for fighting their corner. It was heartwarming, and it really actually even during my most darkest and angriest times, it really inspired me how you
Yeah.
guys
The solidarity was quite remarkable. And, it was all out of love.
exactly. And
So I had a lot of fun today, Yuri. Thank you.
well, thank you as well, Barbara, and folks. Yes, have a great weekend coming up. And One Plus One tomorrow. Our Africa series is canceled, but we will be back next week. Abiomi has some personal matters to deal with, and yes, but don't worry, we will be back next week. And folks, it's the 30th anniversary of Michael Mann's crime drama Heat, often regarded not only as one of the greatest crime dramas, but also one of the greatest movies of all time. So happy 30th to it. Go watch it if you haven't. Robert De Niro's character, Neil, is arguably, in my opinion, the greatest outlaw and anti-hero ever put to pen, computer, and later screen. Movie is a bit flawed, but arguably it's one of the best movies, although it's one of Al Pacino's worst performances. But it's a good film, and I guarantee you will have a soft spot for if you give it 3 times watch. And if folks are interested, I have conversations with ChatGPT about various aspects of the movie, which I'm going to post in the links. And until then, folks, good night, everyone. All my best, and yes, and good night and good luck. And Barbara, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Yuri. Bye-bye.